Good evening, everyone. Welcome to your latest Wolves Fancast match preview in association with Auddy and the Boston Coffee Vending Company. On tonight's show, we've got myself and Jeffo, and just two great custodians of the Wolverhampton Football Club from a media point of view. I'll call it. Got Johnny Phillips and Paul Berry. I'll come to you first, Johnny. How are things?
Yeah, very good, thanks. Exciting time for the club. Never a dull moment at Wolves, and this is definitely one of them.
No, it's like I said. It's you're either born by Parlour or Wolves turn you. It's literally a roller coaster club, isn't it? Obviously you've got a book that you'll be plugging a bit more in depth tonight. But I'll just quickly ask, how are you, Paul Berry?
I'm all good, mate. Thank you. All good.
Thank you both for giving up your time this evening. We had a bit of a post-match reaction to the Man United defeat the other night. Jeff, I was obviously involved in that episode, but I'll come to you first, Johnny. What's your sort of feelings on that loss and the decision at the end? Now you've had a bit more time to digest it.
It was a bad decision at the end. I think everyone acknowledged that straight away, particularly the PGMOL. I wouldn't like that to take the gloss off the overall performance. It was a great performance. I was just so impressed with them. There was just so much to enjoy, particularly from Cunha and Nunes, who I thought were fantastic. But also Sarabia, who offered a lot and showed glimpses of perhaps the promise that we've been hoping, and Gomez, Lamina, just dead solid. There was loads to love about it. I thought it was a great performance, and I know we didn't get anything from the game, but I just hope that performance stays in the players' minds, and they can sort of they can keep them up. I think the big problem would be keeping it up. The energy levels were phenomenal, and I think to keep that up over a season will be hard.
I'm not one to sort of shy away from my opinion. I'm surprised, Jeff, I didn't laugh when you were talking about Sarabia showing a bit of glimpses. What did you actually see from Sarabia there on Monday, Johnny? Because I'm really curious, because Lopetegui's left now, and I genuinely felt there was a sort of manager's son vibe when it came to Sarabia.
So Sarabia's a footballer, and sometimes in this era of stats and everyone's reliance on them. Don't get me wrong, there's absolutely a place for stats. I always think you should trust your eyes when you look at footballers. And he's a ball player. He's somebody who's comfortable on the ball, and he's just got a little bit about him. And I thought on the day, I mean, I was sat and I just dug out, so I was low down, pitch side. He linked the lines very well. I just like the way he found a little bits of space in between the lines. His touch was solid, touch was good, and I liked him. I'll be dead straight. I thought there's potential there.
I've said before that I think he's a very tidy footballer, a footballer that we're going to need when, in recent times, when we've struggled against teams with a low block. I think he'll come very useful in those games. But if we're going to have this sort of high intensity, high press, I'm not sure whether he's going to be a guaranteed start to the majority of the season. What's your opinion on Sarabia, Paul?
Yeah, a bit like that, really. I think you can see a player in him, but I'm not sure we've quite seen it just yet. But again, he might be that sort of player that does take a bit of time because of the sort of player he is. And maybe things will change a bit now with the change in manager. I mean, obviously, Lopetegui brought him here, didn't he? But I just wonder if he might end up being better suited to where we are now. Because I think one of the keys for me, and particularly the other night, and also in the games last season, obviously losing Neves, you're always going to miss Neves, and he was massive for us for so many years. But I kind of almost think we might end up being a better team because of that. The way we coped without him last year, I think it was those 2 or 3 games with that 3 in midfield, and Nunes having the chance to sort of show what he can do a little bit. And so and again, the other night, I just felt like we were just a bit more of a team. It's not like everyone just getting the ball and passing to Neves because you know that he can produce some magic. I think, and maybe that will help Sarabia in the future, that all the different players will perhaps get a bit more of a chance to shine a little bit more and more of a collective.
You mentioned sort of Cunha and Nunes when we first came on, Johnny. They were value for their transfer fee on Monday night, weren't they? Hopefully, the whole point of Monday's game for me now is for everyone not to get overexcited. That is pretty much the benchmark that we need to be setting in our performances now. You might not get the points that you need every week, but that performance intensity is what we want as a supporter.
Yeah, it has to be the performance in terms of those players in particular. Because Nunes, I think, is coming good, and I think he will come good, and you can see why. Mendes is due one that works for this club. It's been a while, and I think he's going to be one that that works for Wolves. And even if he doesn't hang around too long, I think Wolves will make a decent profit on him. And Cunha just showed so much. I was so impressed with Cunha on the ball, off the ball. He was just, really, really at the forefront of everything, and was happy to take players on. And I loved what I saw.
What was your thoughts again, Jeff? Just to remind the viewers who didn't manage to catch the reaction show that came out on Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, I was very impressed. I think to go and set that sort of benchmark performance against a team like Man United in their own backyard, who come into the season with a lot of pressure on their backs, to be able to, push on and potentially challenge for a title is fantastic, really. I sort of echo back to what we were saying about Sarabia earlier and even Ruben, is that now a lot of the players who play for Wolves, they're all of a similar sort of ilk. They're all really physically athletic players, and they're very good. So you João Gomez and Lamina, they cover a lot of ground and they're very intense in the way they're playing. Whereas with Sarabia and Ruben before, is that they didn't have this sort of natural athleticism. And I think that's probably where Sarabia is probably going to have his issues within playing with this team, is that he has, like you said, Danny, he hasn't got the intensity to probably play against a team where we need to play on the front foot and we need to play with a high level of pressure. So it's just about bringing a team together and having somebody who fits within the identity that Wolves want to build and, what Gary O'Neill wants to build as well.
It'll be interesting to see what Gary O'Neill does this Saturday. Obviously, first game at Molineux, the fans will be expecting to see that sort of level of performance again, whether sort of Fabio Silva comes in for Sarabia or even Hwang, who I think offers a bit more intensity than Sarabia. We'll see. We'll talk about that a bit more in depth. But as I mentioned, we've got Paul and Johnny on this evening to plug their latest book, Revolution of Wolves. On the back of sort of Bitten by Wolves, Johnny, it's another proud piece of yours, I think. Obviously, everyone, I've already brought it. It's a great read. Tell the people a bit more about it.
Yeah, it was. It felt a natural progression from the last one I did, and it was Paul actually who came to me to chat about it originally, and we discussed this idea of a sort of look at the modern Wolves and something taking the club forward from their first promotion, which was 20 years ago, and this is the 20th anniversary season of their first Premier League campaign, to the present day and how they've developed, how they've modernised, and what they've had to done. And between the two of us, I think we've created something that Wolves fans will like. We've managed to reach an unbelievable amount of people at all levels of the club, and I hope it's a book that Wolves fans enjoy, and I hope it's a book that provides loads of insight.
I mean, I'm a proper sort of 90s kid. I remember crying to Beacon FM or whatever it was when we lost to Bolton in the playoffs in the 90s. So when we finally made it to the Premier League in 2003, those are moments that I'll never forget. Paul, what's your sort of insight into the book? How much did you enjoy the creation of it?
Yeah, really good. As Johnny says, I think it's been such we were talking about the Wolves roller coaster, I think, before we come on air, wasn't it? It's kind of like you just never know where Wolves are going to be, and there's never too much stability either way. But I think this 20 years in particular, so much has happened. The differences in the three promotions, obviously I think all with different owners, obviously with different managers and a lot of different players. But each time, I think Wolves cemented themselves in the Premier League that little bit more up until, obviously, the explosion, if you like, under Fosun. So there's that kind of underpinning it, three very different promotions and three very different results at the end of it. But again, in the middle of it, the relegations, a double relegation, some of the stuff that went on behind the scenes that we've managed to kind of pick up along the way. And I think the beauty of it, and as Johnny says, we spoke to so many people and they're all really keen to talk. I think, Johnny in particular got hold of Ruben Neves and Diogo Jota towards the end of last season, and both of them were really happy to help. I think almost, they want their thoughts down there, and hopefully this book is something that'll, be a bit of a legacy of their time and it'll last. But they all enjoyed their time at Wolves so much. And even those for whom it didn't go so well, this club kind of gets you, doesn't it? And it sucks you in. And I think hopefully people will see as they read through the book that just comes out, almost in every chapter.
with the amount of content that's provided by the likes of ourselves, the official club, every man and his dog nowadays, it's great to have something in writing to sort of reminisce on. Some of the stories that I enjoyed, obviously the how it came about that Paul Ince decided to join the club. That the whole story about him just basically signing just to spite Alex Reyes is the epitome of Paul Ince, isn't it, Johnny?
Yeah, they're great. Ince and Ray are brilliant, and they were so generous with their time, and particularly Paul Ince, who doesn't really do much media, and he was good, and he spoke so fondly. At the end of the hour or so we had, he said it was really good to reminisce, and of course, 20 years on from him and Ray landing at the club together, they're still working together, or they were up until last season when they left Reading, and they're just best mates, and they very much weren't best mates. If you've read the book as you have so far, they weren't best mates when they got together at Wolves, but what they fostered was something amazing, and you got a real sense of mutual trust and respect amongst those two. And Ince, for all that he has a persona sometimes of being a bit flash, there's genuine substance to him, and he cares deeply, and he cared and still does about Wolves deeply, and I hope that came through as well.
Yeah, people forget just how long he was at Wolves. Obviously, I think he was only due to come for the one season just to get us promoted. And I think maybe like 4 or 5 in the end, was it?
I think it was the second. I think the second. After Man United, I think it was Wolves he played for the most. Yeah.
Well, I was a local journalist when Ince was there with the Birmingham Mail, and Johnny will probably echo this from his work with Sky. And he was unbelievable to deal with for myself and the Express and Star. I think it was a guy called Steve Marshall at the time. You know, if ever we wanted to speak to him, he was there. He'd almost, and especially with that persona he'd had in his England past, he'd have the national journalists waiting after a match, and he'd walk past them and come up to us too. Because I think he kind of understood where his audience was, and the fact, it just showed he really bought into the Wolves project, and obviously ultimately he wanted to be a manager as well, which didn't quite come off. But yeah, real fond memories of dealing with him, as Johnny's alluded to.
Massive player for Wolves in that promotion season. Obviously, we've talked about how long he was there. He is that sort of player that every club needs within their dressing room. That sort of leadership, that unreasonable desire to win games and just bringing that professionalism. And obviously, João Moutinho announced yesterday that he'd officially left the club, saying, "I was very proud to be part of Wolverhampton family, proud of the 5 years that I wore this great club shirt, proud of the opportunity to play for the best football in the world, proud on being a Wolf. Now is a time to express my deep gratitude to the club, the staff, the teammates, and especially the supporters, the unbelievable and amazing fans of those who never leave us feeling alone, who gave us encouragement, strength, support, and soul. Thank you so much for these 5 magical years. I am a Wolf like them, and I will never forget all these great memories." It was inevitable that João Moutinho was going to leave this summer, but was sort of disappointing to see, wasn't it, Johnny? Because he's out of all the midfielders that you've seen in your lifetime, I know you like the likes of like Paul Cook, but where does João Moutinho rank?
Yeah, he ranks as the best. I mean, I know Ruben Neves is the sort of poster boy of Fosun, and Neves may go on to achieve more than Moutinho, although I'm not sure. But I think Moutinho is the best. When Moutinho took to the pitch for the first time, and I thought, I've never seen anyone like this in a Wolves shirt before. Never seen such an unbelievably accomplished footballer who wants the ball at his feet. And, he's very much, along with a couple of others, you look at those players and you think that wouldn't have been possible without Fosun. And I know Fosun are getting an awful lot of stick at the moment, and in some cases and in some instances, a lot of the criticism is deserved. But these players are only here because of what happened with that final takeover. This book's a 3-parter. It's about the 3 different Premier League eras, and we were so blessed to see Moutinho, so blessed to see Jimenez, Neves, Jota, and it's testament to the current ownership that we got him here. And I thought it would be a season at max. And again, a bit like Paul Ince, there's the parallel. 20 years ago, he's a midfielder who's ended up here for ages and ages, and looks at his time here with such great fondness.
What is it that keeps these players here? We talked about sort of, in my eyes, Ruben Neves could have left the season we got promoted. His stock was that high at the time. Obviously, the caliber of player that he was, but it can't just be the orange chips, Jeffo.
It can't be. I mean, there's got to be something magical about the area. I echo what Johnny says. He's probably the greatest midfielder to probably play in a Wolves shirt. It was an absolute honour to see, somebody who's played that many times for Portugal. He's won so many trophies. To pull on the Wolves jersey and to entertain the Molineux faithful was incredible. And he's magical. And some great memories. And the people that you also mentioned there, Ruben Neves, Jimenez, they're going to have a great legacy. People are going to look back and remember these times because, as you said, the last 20 years in Wolves history has been probably the most condensed period of ups and downs that anyone could ever remember in the history of the club. And to have times where we were riding so high, the FA Cup semi-final, going through Europe, doing it with these players, they're going to be remembered and they're going to have one hell of a legacy. And people look at it and have great top memories and great moments that we'll all be able to look back on and smile and remember and say, yeah, we were there and we enjoyed it.
And if there's ever a book that sort of describes like it's a Revolution of Wolves, isn't it? You can find it at Waterstones in Wolverhampton. I'm sure there's a few copies still left at my local, the Cleveland Arms. Hopefully it'll be in the Wolves Club shop soon. It's on Amazon as well for all the hardback and Kindle owners out there to try and get that. Just want to mention the charity that Jason Guy is involved with proceeds going from the book.
Yeah, so last week, all the books that were sold on the opening night were included a donation to Jason's charity. The 1P36 Legacy Trust, obviously, a lot of people know daughter Olivia that's receiving a lot of care and attention at the moment and support from that charity. So, yeah, a lot of the sales on the night, proceeds went to Jason. We did a raffle as well. So we managed to hopefully, raise a few £100 for them as well. There's a few signed copies left, so if anyone wants to, it's available in all those different places. If anyone wants to sort of get in touch with myself or Johnny on Twitter, we can arrange, for postage and stuff with those if anyone does want a signed copy, if it doesn't devalue it too much.
Paul, I'm just going to put you on the spot a second. Correct me if I'm wrong. Out of the three promotions that are involved in this book, what's your favourite out of the three? Because was 2008-09 you were working within the club at the time?
That's right, yeah. So I was a journalist for the 03-04, and then I was in the club 08-09, and I was in the club 13-14, so 10 years ago for the League One promotion. So and I left halfway through the Nuno season for the last one. So I think I'd probably have to go 08-09. I mean, both the ones I was in the club Mick one and the Kenny Jackett one were just brilliant seasons and brilliant people. On and off the pitch, the players were fantastic and the staff and the management were brilliant. But I think that was my first year, having moved over from working as a reporter. So it was kind of a lot of different things to get used to. A very different way of working. And I think with Mick McCarthy, they're kind of almost a privilege. I'm sure any of us as Wolves fans would think, to accompany him into all his press conferences after matches and beforehand and to chat to him. Mick didn't give too much away. I mean, you can't tell Mick how to deal with the media with everything he's been through, but it's a privilege to watch him. And then I think the celebrations of that QPR game, those players, I'd had nothing to do with it, but to be able to share a bit in their enjoyment of the achievement they'd produced over that season. It's such a largely young group, many of whom went on to better things, many of whom stayed on the Wolves roller coaster with all the ups and downs. But I think I'd say that season was, really special.
Yeah, the 08-09 season, Stu Kessel in the comment section saying that pitch invasion after the QPR game was awesome. Having digested all those promotions, Johnny, where does your sort of favourite lie?
It's such a tough one, that. I think for a one-off day, it's Cardiff in 2003. I don't think anything will top that. It just felt like purgatory was over. And it was such a long wait, and the way it just came together, the way we got to enjoy the day, it felt like it was the perfect day. But I think the way the sort of the 17-18 team under Nuno grabbed me. I'm a bit too old in the tooth, a bit too old and grey and cynical these days. And I thought I was over being falling for a team, but I definitely fell for Nuno's team. And they definitely captured my heart, and the way they went about it as well. It just felt like it wasn't. These sort of things don't happen to Wolves, so I'm probably going to have to go. Even though the characters involved in the 03, 04, the 02, 03 promotion were characters I'd probably identify with more. I would definitely have to say Nuno's promotion was the one that really won my heart.
It's hard to disagree with that. Carl Henry won't appreciate that the 08, 09 team isn't getting the plaudits that it deserved again. But
if you're not careful, probably.
If it wasn't for sort of Birmingham and Reading losing every week that we did, it might have been a bit more difficult for them to win the league in the end. But like you just mentioned, Johnny, that 17-18 season, I've said this a couple of times in WhatsApp groups, and it sounds really doom and gloom. But I'm hoping you guys can have another book on the back of this one, because me personally, I think we might have peaked as a club in my lifetime now, because of that, how much I love that 17-18 side. A lot of those players were sort of unknown. Nuno wasn't an established manager at the time. We still had the likes of Doherty and Cody had come from a previous regime of not much success, to then ride that storm all the way to, I remember seeing you before Espanyol, Johnny, in Barcelona, and those moments, you can't really buy them. I never envisaged going to see Wolves in Europe with my dad in the same city, and mates that are, part-time fans who decided to travel over for a bit of a session and hopefully see a bit of Wolves in a local bar. Those moments you literally can't buy back, and hopefully that's why I said hopefully you can get another book on the back of this, because we need some highs, because at the moment it has been looking a bit pessimistic. What's your sort of feelings on the whole situation with Lopetegui now, during their times, had a bit more time to settle? Does he come out with any sort of grace, or is it sour from your point of view?
I think it was a bad time for everyone. It was a bad time for Lopetegui. It was a bad time for the club. I think he opened a can of worms, arguably. I think the way he behaved, it was undignified. A lot of what he did, he didn't go about it the right way. I don't think he's come out of that very well. But what he has done, he's shone a light on what maybe is going on at Wolves and what on things behind the scenes. I did a column at the weekend about maybe structural changes needed at Wolves, and by that, I wasn't for a minute suggesting Fosun as time is up, because I know a lot of people do think that Fosun should leave. I absolutely don't. I think they've been solid owners who've put their money where their mouth is, but I think there's been an awful lot of waste in the post-Nuno era in particular. And I think structurally, they just need to find a position whereby they can get the most out of their investment and they can get the most out of their head coach. Now, obviously, we don't know a lot of what goes on in China, and the only go-between between the UK and China is Jeff Shi. So it's arguably very tough for him to work under the circumstances he has to, where he reports back to Fosun in Shanghai and then reports down to the people under his chain of command in the UK, and clearly relationships that haven't worked on more than one occasion as well. So I think that whole Lopetegui era was bad. Bad for the club, bad for Lopetegui. It perhaps shone a light where the club didn't want it to be shone. But if a bit of self-reflection, a bit of soul searching can come out of this, then absolutely the club can move forward positively. I think a show of humility, just putting their hands up where things haven't worked out, things have gone wrong, mistakes arguably have been repeated, but within that, there's plenty to think. This isn't a lost cause by any stretch.
It's disappointing now the dust has settled, because you look at that performance on Monday, you look at the sort of the caliber of players that we've still got. There's some serious international players still within the club. I want to be annoyed at Lopetegui, but when you look at all the sort of hands that he's been dealt, obviously the goalpost being moved on him financially twice, seeing Unai Emery getting such a war chest down the road is going to have rubbed him up the wrong way. But for him to still, obviously, I think he'd announced that he was leaving after the Celtic game, so to then still help the team put in a game plan for Man United, which then Gary O'Neill fine-tuned to get that performance in Monday. I've got some respect for him, but it just seems that Jeff Shee came out with a letter and said, we've struggled, we're going to be struggling with financial fair play this summer. We need to sort of recoup and be more sustainable to then hopefully be free to spend more freely next summer. With the ability and caliber that Lopetegui's got, you would have thought he would have backed himself to keep us up, and then he's got the war chest to go again next summer. But if he's already had the goalpost moved on him twice, there's seriously an amount of trust that's diminished, hasn't there?
Yeah, I mean, is this for me or Bez?
You jumped in first, Johnny, so you go on.
Yeah.
We've had
Yeah,
one important comment just before you jump in, Johnny, from Liam Berry saying, "Can you tell my Paul to get out my room, please?"
Brilliant.
He's away on holiday, so he can do one.
Tell us how it is, Johnny.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously something hurt Lopetegui, and for Wolves to spend so long courting him and to give him such a huge contract, and for it to sour in the way it did, something clearly went wrong, and trust broke down. I don't think anyone can deny that. And we were left with a situation where 6 days before the season started, Wolves were without a head coach, and it was an extraordinary chain of events. And as I said earlier, nobody has come out of this looking good. And if it could have been avoided, it hasn't been avoided, and that goes on, on both parties on that one. In a sense, this is an opportunity to reset. This is Matt Hobbs's man, so it's an opportunity whereby he can now be judged wholly on what happens from here on in. Gary O'Neill, there were certain skeptics at the start looked at Gary O'Neill and thought, well, why are we sacking someone who was essentially an interim manager at Bournemouth? He's got a lot more to him than that, and I hope that Monday night has shown that. He's a man of substance. He's not always somebody who wants to be talking in front of cameras. He's not someone who likes to talk at length in front of cameras. He says what needs to be said. There's sort of no bullshit to him. He's just straight down the line. And I hope that fans give him a chance, and I hope that it works for him. And I hope something good comes of this. But obviously, there was clearly a breakdown of trust, as there has been in the past. And again, that goes back to what I was saying about structural change, and maybe it would be good of Fosun to look at the way things are structured. And there's an awful lot of responsibility on Jeff, and maybe if that responsibility was shared, I'm not saying Jeff go or anything like that. I'm just saying if maybe there was a structure in place where it wasn't reliant on one man being the go between Shanghai and Wolverhampton, then that would be beneficial.
I don't want to sort of put you in any trouble here, Paul, but what is the hierarchy where it comes to with Jeff Shea at the moment? Because I thought it was very, I don't want to say odd, but I thought it was poor that there was no comments from him in regards to the appointment of Gary O'Neill, whereas 99 times out of 100, a chairman will be the one who formally makes the appointment in the media. Yeah,
I mean, I think it's changed quite a bit since I was working at Wolves, and I was sort of with Jeff for probably 18 months or so, the first 18 months, which were obviously very up and down, from the chaos of the first season to then Nuno coming in and really, grabbing the baton and going onwards. And at that point, obviously, there was still Laurie Dalrymple, who was kind of heading up the non-football side, if you like, and Kevin Thirlwell, sporting director. Kevin Thirlwell's obviously moved on, and I think then Scott Sellers took it on, and now Matt Hobbs, who obviously seems to be doing a very good job, and is communicating a lot. And it's maybe that other side where we've got a lot of different managers who are all, very capable and very good and professional in their different areas. But perhaps, it's how hands-on Jeff is with those guys, I suppose. I'm sure he is, but is that the role Johnny's almost talking about? You need someone in the middle of those, being able to be that one person that can take the flak and more, apart from not in the individual areas, but more as a club as a whole, and be Jeff's eyes and ears as well. Because, it does. Matt Hobbs has communicated a lot and at length on a lot of the football stuff that's been happening, which I think, is great, and fans will really appreciate that. But I think, when a manager comes in, you would expect the chairman to say something, and maybe that's still to come. Maybe, I don't know if there's anything happening in the programme this weekend or, over the coming weeks, you would expect to hear something. But yeah, it does feel a bit of a reset. Like, we've had this 20 years of ups and downs, and now we're kind of almost heading into a new domain almost with Gary O'Neill now sort of hoping to take it on and try and improve it himself.
I was one of those skeptics that you mentioned, Johnny, a few minutes ago. I've still got a bit of skepticism towards Gary O'Neill. Obviously, he's clearly a highly rated coach. He's obviously impressed whoever at Wolves is impressed to get the job, whether it's Matt Hobbs, whether Jeff Shee's had any involvement with it whatsoever. We'll find out in the future, I suppose. My only concern with Gary O'Neill is if he does a fantastic job this season and they do give him a, hyphenated war chest, if you will, has he got the sort of aura to pull big name players in?
Do you know what? Cross that bridge when it comes to it. If Wolves are in a position where they're giving Gary O'Neill millions of pounds to spend next summer, then something has gone spectacularly right. So I wouldn't worry about that. I think let's just get past this season first. Give Gary a chance, see where he's at, and then if money does become available, then take it from there. I think Gary is probably somebody who can work very well with Matt Hobbs, and I think Matt is probably going to want a big input into transfers, and it may be the case, which we see at a lot of clubs, whereas the head coach doesn't get a huge input into transfers. That's done in a sort of sporting director capacity. But yeah, I mean, if we're coming to a point where we're worrying about whether or not Gary O'Neill can handle millions of pounds, it means something's gone right, definitely.
I'm already on chapter 33 of Revolution of Wolves, Johnny. That's what it is, the O'Neill era. Let's quickly move on to Saturday's game at home to Brighton and game week 2 of the Premier League. We kick off at 3:00, but Nottingham Forest versus Sheffield United kick off the weekend at 7:45 tomorrow night. There's some decent games. Tottenham versus Man United. I think the Saturday 8:00 Man City at home to Newcastle is probably the best game of the weekend, because Man City, I know that they've got an amazing squad, but the momentum that Newcastle have got at the moment, I've said it before, the momentum that Newcastle have got really pains me, because it feels like that should have been us, Paul. They had an ownership change. They had the fans back on side. They haven't brought in sort of, Robinho's like Man City did back in the day. They've gone about it the right way. And like I said, the momentum that they've got as a club, I'm jealous of it at the moment.
Yeah, and there's kind of, I think you're spot on in a way. There's a lot of similarities in there in terms of, one club City. I know their stadium's bigger and perhaps maybe their fan base is a bit bigger, but we all know what Wolves fans are like when things are going well. Even at the height of Nuno's reign, you think back to the cup run and that night against Manchester United, that's almost the zenith in it of what you just want more of those nights. But then beating all the big clubs as well. So yeah, I totally get it. And I think, Eddie Howe, he's done an incredible job, hasn't he? When you think that the last time he went, I think he went to Burnley in the Premier League, didn't he? I think, and it just didn't work at all for him. I don't know if in the Premier League, but certainly it was
Championship.
Championship. So it was a step up from Bournemouth at the time, which obviously it isn't so much now, and it just didn't work for him. So you kind of, when he got that job at Newcastle, you were just wondering how it's going to go, but he just seems to have taken to it like a duck to water. And sometimes I guess managers and coaches fit with certain clubs, and I think that's again the best thing is he's had a lot of money to spend, but he spent it so wisely, and it's a mix of the sort of stardust, but with a really solid Premier League players, your Dan Burns and others like that have just gone in and made a huge difference. So yeah, I think a bit of envy for sure from Wolves, but I think it's still there, isn't it? It's still there for a club like Wolves when you think that Newcastle almost got relegated a couple of years ago. The amount of money they've had access to is frightening, and it's probably far beyond what Wolves could ever get. But I think it's certainly something to aspire to. It's like people used to talk about Charlton Athletic in the Premier League, and there's been that club from lower down that got in there and did well and were knocking on the door of Europe from time to time. So maybe that now is something to aim for, and you won't necessarily have the financial resources, but with everything else and the fan base and just getting a team together that want to play for each other can make so much difference.
That's it. It's all about just building a team of unity with no egos and all, just the incentive of trying to achieve something that they haven't achieved before. You talked about Eddie Howe and sort of the players that he's sort of upgraded. Obviously, Miguel Almiron's been impressive. It's similar to what Nuno did with Cody at Wolves. You take these players randomly, and before you know it, they're reaching levels you never even imagined. Going back to the game week 2 fixtures, if you're a betting person like myself, Jeffo, who's your teams for the banker win this weekend in game week 2?
Oh, that's a good question. I'd certainly say Monday night is probably the best one to see. I think the there's a lot going on at Crystal Palace at the moment. So there seems to be a little bit of an exodus with players. Michael Elise being linked with the latest one to leave. So I think Arsenal are probably your bankers there. I mean, if I was going to go for a cheeky bet for a I suppose a shot result, I'd probably say I'd look at Bournemouth to maybe get something against Liverpool at Anfield, because Liverpool did not look comfortable with McAllister so deep against Chelsea, and they look like they've got a lot of work to do.
I think my money would be on Villa to beat Everton at home on Sunday. Getting absolutely hammered by Newcastle. They're going to want to put that performance right. Where would your money be, Johnny?
Are we saying I can't say Manchester City because that's too obvious? if I can't say Manchester City, no, I disagree with Jeff as well. I'm saying Liverpool. Sorry about that. A Manchester City Liverpool double.
Yeah, I've gone heavy Liverpool with my fancy Premier League team this weekend. Where would your money be, Paul?
I think Tottenham. I think it's the first game in charge, isn't it, for Ange at home? I'm not going to try and say his surname, which is probably remiss of me. And I just wasn't. I suppose it's difficult to say. I really wasn't impressed with Man United at all. But I don't know if that was because of how well Wolves played and how well we pressed. I mean, even for the first 5 minutes. I mean, I'm looking at the keeper, and I know it's his first game, but they're trying to play it around at the back, and I just think if they're going to do that, they've not got the players to do it. They obviously know what he did at the end of the game, which should really have got Wolves a point. So I just fancy that if Spurs get at it from the off and get on the offensive and press quite high, I think Spurs could beat Man United Saturday for sure. It
felt like to a degree that Man United thought all they had to do was turn up on Monday and they'd get a result. Obviously, Rio Ferdinand talked about a demolition job pre-match, but it just felt like Man United were really disjointed, and I'm not sure how Mason Mount and Bruno Fernandes can play together. What's your opinion on that, Johnny?
Yeah, I think they got it wrong in the middle. I think he picked his best side, given that Højlund was unavailable. I think he picked his best side. The only one you could probably say that the real issue was whether or not it was Dalot or Wan-Bissaka at right back, but Dalot's consistent. Wan-Bissaka on his day is probably the best. Where it didn't work was he had Casemiro sitting deep and he had Fernandes and Mount further up. And that's where when Wolves broke the lines, it was just Casemiro in defending. Whereas if he'd had Casemiro and one of Mount and Fernandes sitting with the other further up, then that would have negated a lot of the runnings that Wolves were doing. But that said, you wouldn't have had Mount or Fernandes as players in there who could do that. It would have had to have been McTominay, and then you're sacrificing one of Mount or Fernandes. So I think that's where he went wrong. And Wolves exploited that. But you could also argue that better teams would exploit that much, much better because we didn't score. So just imagine that Liverpool attack, for example, going through Man United like Wolves did on Monday. They've scored a lot more.
I think obviously Liverpool beat Man United 7-0 last season, but based on the performances at the weekend, that Liverpool Man United game this season could easily be sort of 5-5. I think it will be literally end to end. It'd be interesting to see how Marcus Rashford kicks on this season. I thought he was outstanding last season. To talk about the lineups for the game on Saturday between Wolves and Brighton, we mentioned, and I've mentioned quite regularly within WhatsApp groups, that I'm not a fan of Pablo Sarabia. I've got sort of Wolves in a 4-2-2-2 again, but I've got Mateus Nunes and Pedro Neto just behind Fabio Silva and Mateus Cunha. What sort of changes, if any, would you make to that lineup there, Jeffo?
I mean, yeah, it's a pretty strong lineup. I think Sarabia probably might be the one who misses out, like you put there. For the style that sort of O'Neill that showed in that first game, you could say that Juan could maybe come in because he's got that intensity in his play and he can put us on the front foot. But everyone there has sort of cemented themselves into the shirt pretty much because everyone was at such a high level against Man United that has, as we've said, set the standard of where we need to play as a team. And the question marks over people like Ait Nouri and whether they'd be the ones who could take the shirt and to grab it with both hands they were kind of answered during that game. So now it's about consistency and about the players playing at that level that they've shown.
Apart from sort of Man City, Paul, is there a worse team you'd hate to play than Brighton this weekend? Because these are the team that I fear the most in the Premier League now. I feel that they're such an outstanding team to watch. Brighton, they've got some excellent players that I think they're destined to go on to bigger and greater things if Brighton somehow don't make Champions League this season. Obviously, just falling short last season, but outstanding team, Brighton.
They are, and I think they scored nine past us last season, didn't they? I think over the 2 games, but. No, I'd absolutely agree. And I think this is where it's quite fascinating because I think we played so well against United and United were either poor or we made them poor or they were complacent. If we produce a similar performance against Brighton, I think then, it's time to start getting really excited just because of the sort of team Brighton are, how good they are. They won't be as easy to play through as kind of Johnny's just said Man United were. They've got so much firepower, strong at the back. Honestly, if we get a result, even a point, it's you're at home, you want to go out and attack and win. Even a point would be, especially after last season, a really good result. But yeah, if we come away on Saturday night and we're as enthused and optimistic about Wolves as we are after Monday night, and I think Wolves will have put in a really good performance, and there will be something to start hopefully shouting about. And I think the team selection is an interesting one because I just so often, even when I worked at Wolves, you're almost screaming to go attacking, which would be in this situation having Fabio up there with Cunha behind him. I just wonder whether he'll still keep it similar, whether it's Sarabia or Hwang, whether he'll just try and, not go too attacking and gung-ho at the start, especially with how Brighton are, and perhaps rely on the breakaway. I mean, Neto, I don't think we mentioned him, have we? You might have mentioned him on your show the other night, but he was unbelievable, I thought, the other night. And again, if he's someone that gets back to the form pre-injuries, he's going to be massive for us. So, yeah, it's a really interesting team, especially if he does go Fabio and Cunha. I think it's a big message from Gary O'Neill as well, but I just wonder if he'll try and keep it, as he did the other night to start with, and then introduce Fabio in the second half.
I thought Nelson Semedo had his best appearance in a Wolves shirt on Monday night. I'd like to hear any other suggestions for any other games that he's played in where he was better than on Monday night. I thought he was outstanding, absolutely pocketed. Garnacho was great going forward, was great defensively. But he's got a really tough task this weekend, hasn't he, Johnny, coming up against Estupiñán and Mitoma?
Yeah, absolutely. But before I answer that, I am going to have to dip out after this question. Domestic life has caught up on me. You've probably heard it all in the background, just raising the bar of kicking off. But I'll have to dip out after this question. But yes, Nelson Semedo will have his work cut out. And anyone who was at Brighton last season would have seen the way that Wolves were ripped to shreds down the flanks in that game and absolutely torn apart. You don't get it much in the Premier League these days because teams are so well organised and defenders can play such good systems and stick to their tasks so rigidly. But Brighton absolutely tore Wolves a strip last season, and if they do that again, or if they come at Wolves like they did that day, it could be a hard afternoon. I think it'll be a different game to the one at the Amex. I don't think Wolves will be as open, and I don't think they'll be as vulnerable. In terms of a team selection, I think he'll probably pick the same team. But I think he'll pick the same team. There's a big case for Hwang coming in as a defensive-minded attacker. And I guess Sarabia would be the obvious one to make way. But having watched the game from a low angle on Monday night, from Gary O'Neill's point of view, I said Sarabia did all right without wanting to start a fight in the Fancast pundits box. I actually thought that Gary O'Neill will look at Sarabia's performance and think he did all right, but who knows?
Stu Kessler in the comments has said that's a team I'd pick, Dan. So as far as I'm concerned, if Gary O'Neill wants to stick with Sarabia, then me and Stu Kessler are ready to jump in when it goes all terribly wrong. Paul, what's your sort of score prediction for the game on Saturday? Like I say, it's going to be absolutely tough against this Brighton side. Some really impressive players. Signing João Pedro from Watford was a nice, shrewd bit of business for them. And Evan Ferguson is pretty much what I was hoping Fabio Silva would be at this point in his Wolves career.
Yeah, I think I'll probably go 2 each, which I know is quite goal scoring. But I think, I know we didn't score. Desmond indeed. I know we didn't score the other night, but we looked so close to it. And I think we might still need that goal scorer. It might be that Fabio's the one that it clicks for this season, but I do fancy us if we play with that same intensity, attacking intent, especially on the break. And we know Brighton can score goals, and we know that probably both defences are going to have their work cut out at times. So yeah, I'd probably go for a 2-2, and I think love to win, obviously, but everything we've all said about Brighton, I'd certainly be I'd be reasonably pleased with the point for sure.
What would your score prediction be for Saturday's game, Jeffo?
I think I don't know whether I feel still riding high from the performance on Monday, but I fancy us to get a result at home. Last season we did so well in the second half of the season. We made Molineux a fortress. So I'd probably go for a 1-0. I think Fabio Silva might be that one to get the goal and to sort of kickstart his second coming, as it were, Molineux. But it's. I think there's a lot to feel good about at the moment, and I think if we, as you said earlier, Paul, if we put a good performance on Saturday against Brighton, I think we could all start to move in the right direction of starting to feel good about the football club again amid the negativity of the last couple of weeks.
Me and Stu Kessler are really on the same wavelength this evening in the comment section. I'm going to go with 2-1 Wolves as well. I feel like we've got to try and rectify last season's performances. The 6-0 defeat was just terrific, but even patches of the 3-2 defeat at home last season were tough to take. I think Matoma absolutely ransacked Nelson Semedo, from if memory serves me correct. Like I said, it's going to be a tough game, but I'm going to go with 2-1 Wolves. I think it's either going to be Fabio or Sasha who gets the win. I think Wolves and hopefully the fan base will carry us over the line on Saturday, because it's an important game. Someone made the comment earlier about we don't want it to go down the same route as Bruno Lage's first 3 games of really exciting performances, but losing 1-0. So we'll be back on Sunday night to review the game. Paul, just one last opportunity to plug the book.
Yeah, so it's if you want a signed copy left over from launch night, just drop myself or Johnny. You can find us on Twitter. Just drop us a tweet and we can sort that out. Otherwise, it's at Waterstones, Wolverhampton. Will be available on Amazon, I think, after the weekend. We're hoping it's going to be in the Wolves shop. And just literally, thanks to everyone that's bought a copy so far, and I hope you enjoy it. Took a lot of work to put together, but it was a labour of love in the end for all the reasons we've all spoken about tonight, and how much we all love Wolves. So yeah, thanks for the support on it, and just hope you really enjoy reading it.
Just one last quiz question, Paul, 'cause I love a quiz. Who were the 2 Wolves players that have photoshopped you and Johnny over there?
Oh my word! I reckon Johnny is he Robbie Dennison? No. What a tough question. Not much in Dennison, is it?
No, you're way off. Johnny is Keith Downing, and you were we had him come to our school to do some sort of NVQ coaching sessions back in my 6th form era. It was Nigel Vaughan.
Oh, blimey, yeah. Oh, man.
Thanks for everyone that's tuned in tonight. Lots of people commenting. Hopefully you'll press the like button before you leave. As always, this Wolves Fancast episode is brought to you by Auddy. We were recently announced as the most popular fan-made podcast per club for the Wolves fan base on Spotify due to the hours that were consumed last season. So we're happy for you to, we're just chuffed for you to keep on supporting us, keep following us at Wolves Fancast. As I mentioned, we'll be back on Sunday for a post-match review of the Wolves game versus Brighton. Have a good weekend. Take care of yourselves. Good night.
Thanks, guys.